So, ladies and gentlemen, I learned something new this week.
What?
From because I'm so liberal and progressive, the appropriate thing to say to be trans inclusive is to say distinguished guests. Welcome to Married to Shade.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. I like it.
I've always wondered
Makes
how
me feel like people are in the place.
Yes,
like,
it does.
Like they're here with us. I like that.
Welcome to Married to Shade, the only black podcast featuring the married couple with advanced degrees in remedial money. I'm your host, Feek Blurman, and this is my lovely wife.
Hey, y'all.
Who doesn't seem to remember to say her name.
Well, I thought you always say my name.
No.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I guess then I've been struggling for a while.
No. Just the last 2 weeks.
This is AJ, guys. And you may be able to tell that
she's doing an impression of, what's the one girl? No. Alicia Keys. Alicia Keys. You're doing Alicia Keys.
Really? I wish I sound that good. So I'm under the weather, but I love you guys, and I love doing this. And so I'm here, and we're going to push through. But I'm going to apologize in advance for my raspy voice and the occasional sniffle. So.
Yep. I myself am also getting over a bug, but I'm much further.
He's patient zero.
It. I am patient. Well, it's probably one of the gremlins that are currently asleep. They may bust in any moment, but it's probably one of them that's patient zero.
Yes,
the
they
littlest one
bring
has had a
in
sniffling
a
nose.
lot of germs. Yep, They live with a runny nose.
So, but we live to bring you this podcast goodness, and that is because we know that you all support us. You support us by being our Patreon patrons. Black Ashlands Podcast Network is a network of podcast shows that runs the gamut of pretty much anything you might want to be into. Me and my wife provide a little bit of relationship perspective combined with pop culture, politics, and general silliness. We have the main BAP, Black Ashlands Podcast Show, which touches on a little bit of everything. We have the Room Podcast, which is nerd episodes and subjects. We're going to be reviewing Justice League probably over the weekend. We have HWAP, which is an all-woman cast that is probably the funniest stuff we have on
That was kind of pathetic. I'm sorry. But it was sincere, though.
You're going to make an enemy out of all the HWAP women. They really...
Why?
Because they really want to like you.
No.
But everything you do towards them is bad.
No, how is that bad? I said... No, I was saying don't do it. Don't do that. Don't do that. I was saying woohoo like girl power, but I'm sick, so my girl power is kind of weak. But I'm sending the energy.
I'll let them take that as they will. So we do it all. We do it all for y'all because you all do so much for us. We have 3 levels of Patreon patronage. For those who don't know what Patreon is, I probably should tell you. Look at blackashlands.com/patreon.com. It's an opportunity to help us keep the show free by essentially providing donations. You donate a little money, you get certain things. The first group is at $3. You just get, to a shout out on the main show and just appreciate showing love. $5 gets you the Black Ashlands Podcast Archive. We have over 500 shows, I believe, if not more, dating back to 2012. And then the $10 gives you exclusive content. So there's so much here to offer. With that in mind, I want to shout out our premium patrons who get a shout out on every show. And that is V. Williams, Monty M., Peter H., Ken H., Pastor Chene, Felt 5, Robbie R., Deloya, Sadida H., Shlonda W., Wanga, Cameron B., Mr. Brent, Simo, Ashley G., Chonella, Knowledge, Dre. Sorry, I wouldn't be saying it so fast, but got like a frog in my chest. Dre, the greatness that is MJ, Donald, Ophelia Ono, Teddy Funk, Charlie Snowflake, and Angela D. Thank you guys so much. With that said, baby, how was your day? How was your day?
Well, now I'm all insecure, thinking I have podcast beefs and stuff. But my day was pretty good. So it's always convenient to work from home when you're sick, or to be able to work from home when you're sick. So that was cool. I have a little office space, but I did most of my work from the bedroom today, so that was nice. It would have been nicer not to be sick. And currently, I'm just going to kind of let you guys into like our setup. So we said a long time ago, we record now in the same room. Woohoo! See, my woohoos are authentic because they always sound bad. But Feek has football on. And today, when I shut down after working...
I'm not watching football while doing the show.
Oh, ooh.
I'm not even looking at the screen.
He was caught. So anyway, but there's a football player. He's the first living football player to be diagnosed with CTE.
Who is this?
I don't know his name.
How do you do that?
So, yeah. So,
you're talking about Aaron Hernandez?
Is it Aaron Hernandez? He's not living. He's not living. Aaron Hernandez killed himself.
He did commit suicide.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's somebody living, and I thought that was cool. Well, no, wait, hold up. Sorry. Rewind. So I did not think it was cool necessarily, but I did think it would be interesting to bring up. Don't know much more than that, but yeah. Other than blowing my nose.
This is an older guy.
Yeah, it was. So I did not read the article.
Vikings.
Boo to me, but I looked at the pictures, and the pictures of his brain were quite interesting. So I was like, I'm gonna bring this up on the podcast because maybe Feek will know something about it, which will save me the time of reading it. But obviously, you didn't know anything about it. But yeah. So what else went on in my life since we last recorded? So I'm still working out this business stuff, so pray for me. It is very stressful. That's what I'll say there. And our son asked for a sibling, but not just any sibling. He wants a sibling of a different color. He wants a
sibling of a different color. He wants me to shoot some... Caucasian.
He didn't
DNA.
go into all that. He didn't ask about how it was going to be done.
Actually, yeah, because I think that wouldn't be good enough for him because that baby would probably be just light skinned. He wants us to adopt a white or Asian baby.
Yes, that is his request.
And that is because we are inner city liberal snobs who go to a school where I guess I'd say at least a good 10% of the kids of color are adopted children.
So I don't think we're inner city snobs. I kind of have an issue with that.
You always
but
try
yeah,
to
but
fall short, you know.
So yeah, there are a lot of diverse families. Mm-hmm. Would that be appropriate to say? At the
diverse
school,
blended
families, and I think it's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. It's definitely causing us to have some interesting conversations about our son. About skin complexions and why people look different. And some of these conversations we had before, but every year it's like a new child because they're older and they have better language to express things. So you have to revisit some of these conversations. And if you're a parent, you totally understand.
Because he has one friend whose parents are Caucasian and the young boy is adopted and African American. And he's known him since he was basically one.
Yeah, since he was very little.
Then did we talk about our son's love life at all?
Yeah, we have, but I don't want to go there. I just want to talk about...
You're never going to want to go there.
I don't want to go there. I'm not ready for the girls now. Like, that's just like a hot button issue.
The girls are clearly ready for him. He is the opposite of his dad, I'll tell you that.
But now, since I've allowed you time to do some of your show research, how was your day, babe?
Woman, my show research, I'm looking at my fantasy team. I did all my research. My shit is in order.
Dude, just tell me how your day was.
My day was great. I was healthy. I breathed out of both nostrils the whole day. It was amazing.
So petty.
So today, speaking of disgusting men, we're going to talk about just the disappointment I have about some men who I am big fans of. Two men in particular are probably some of my favorite people in their realm. One has suffered a pretty significant fall. One there's still some questions out about, but I'm still not comfortable with the fact that there are questions. and just the cavalcade, the train of gropers and rapists and molesters just continues after Buddy Weinstein, Robert Weinstein, what was his name?
Weinstein?
Yeah, Weinstein.
I'm not sure of his first name. I can't think of it right now.
His drama started like a month ago, and since then we've the L's that have fallen for Kevin Spacey, Brett Ratner, just recently, Al Franken today.
So this is how I feel.
But hold on, and so most significantly for me, Louis C.K. and possibly Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Well, at least you said the possibly this time. So I am happy that a lot of these weirdos and creeps and predators, really that's the word I should use. I'm happy that a lot of these predators are being called to the carpet for things that they've done in the past. Unfortunately, most of the things we're hearing about they happened so long ago that there's no the statute of limitations or the ability to bring about any litigation is not an option.
Gone.
Yeah, but that being said, I'm still happy that it's being brought to the light that they are just not good people and were predators and poor decision makers some years ago or at one point in their lives. However, there are a few people who have accusations out there, but I don't want to say it's gray, but it's the amount of facts and information available is
leads you to take some
not
pause.
all that great. So you have to take some pause. You have to take some pause.
So the only one that's truly pause worthy is Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes, which is why I cringe every time you say his name.
Well,
I think that there's and we're going to have that discussion about how you deal with these predators and maybe what we think should happen or what we think is going to happen. And is this going to continue where people are going to call other people to the carpet? But I think we have to still be very careful. There are some people like Kevin Spacey, the writing has been on the wall. He was definitely taking advantage of people, right?
Right.
But then the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world, we really don't know much. And I want to be careful not to kind of just treat the accusations that are coming out as trend call people out because it's on trend.
That is
because
an
I think that's
uncomfortable part of this conversation.
Not a good thing.
Is that underneath this problem of harassment and abuse of women is internet culture. Internet culture is inherently intertwined with this. And internet culture, unlike the issue of harassment and abuse of women, is not above questioning and whatever, I can't think of the word, but it's not above reproach. And a perfect example of this.
It's not above, or it is above. I mean, are people really doing their Googles when they see an article?
No, and that's what I'm
internet?
saying.
Yeah.
They're not. And that's what I mean. I thought that's what not above. I think that's what not above.
Maybe you're using it correctly.
I don't know. You're not feeling your best, but it's okay. I still love
Forgive
you.
me.
You're gonna still be great tonight.
Thank you.
But yeah. So perfect example is that not long after this started, Harvey Weinstein, that's his name. Somebody pulled up a case about Anthony Anderson, and Anthony Anderson's case was from 2004. It was proven that the girl was lying, and it was pretty much immediately thrown out. And that is the thing that is unfortunate and creates this ugly and uncomfortable gray area where as you hear all these allegations, you start to say, you almost get numb to it, and then as you get numb to it, it makes you stop thinking about the issue at hand, because there's always those handful of people that just want shares and likes.
Yeah, I think you're right on. And I am fearful that people are going to get numb to it.
Right.
And the non-famous everyday women who have had experiences like some of the ones that we've heard about in the news as of late or seen articles about on social media, those women will get ignored because this is going to be a trend of sorts, like calling out people.
It's like
the call
pointing.
out is going to be the trend. And when the trend goes away, people are not going to take serious any longer the accusations and the damage that happens when people take advantage of people in that way. So
and that's the main point I think we want to get across. It's not that we're diminishing the issues and the complaints, even in Neil deGrasse Tyson's case. It's that if you really care about this issue, as opposed to just wanting to get on the meme train, you have to also be critical of how all these stories are coming out in each case.
Correct. And and this is not we're not encouraging victim blaming, for you to be critical of the lifestyle choices or the past of anybody who has come out and said they were assaulted. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying that gather your facts, do your Googles, and make sure that it's legitimate as much as feasibly possible, right? Before you share, like, or start to speak negatively about someone, because
send out your angry tweets.
Neil deGrasse Tyson is the only exception I can think of, or the person that's front of mind as we have this conversation, because everybody else, it's a done deal.
Strong,
it's a wrap, and I'm not defending them, and I don't have time.
Have admitted. But Neil deGrasse Tyson's case is a little unique in that I don't think any really mainstream media sources picked it up, which is always a sign. Which is
a little telling. Doesn't necessarily mean anything definitively, but it's a little. And so
that we can use that to transition to the next part. That I'm gonna be fully transparent. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a hero of mine.
Yes,
to the extent that I have had and still have to an extent with hope every intention of introducing his story and who he is to my sons, when they're early enough to read, and having that be an example of the type of man that I want them to grow into. But now I have to wonder: do I have to have now a conversation about drugging and sexual assault as a part of that? And so it's easier.
We may not have a conversation necessarily about drugging and sexual assault,
right? Well, we obviously won't.
But we will have a conversation about making good decisions, respecting people's bodies. Maybe if we get more information and Neil is one of those predatory creeps out there, then we will say that he made poor decisions, but his contribution to science can't be ignored. And that's a thing that we've talked about on this show before.
Right.
Like, can you condemn the person and their acts without having to throw away their art or their research or just their general contributions, positive contributions to society? And I think you can condemn the person and keep the art. And so in Neil deGrasse Tyson's case, we're not talking about art, we're talking about research, we're talking about studies. But
just the value of science.
Yes. And I think that's important. So, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it if it's something we have to deal with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I just really don't like to put people's names out there until there's, enough smoke to indicate fire. I don't think we have that here. But yeah, so you gotta, I just
you have to keep
don't
these
want calling out people to become a trend, because this is a serious matter.
The other one is a huge fan. My favorite probably comedian of all time, which is Louis C.K. Louis C.K. is freaking hilarious. I feel bad that, obviously I feel bad. Let me first say I feel bad for the victims. But I also feel bad for, not so much for him, but for the state of affairs that we're all in as a result of what he did. Does that make sense? Because unlike, say, Neil deGrasse Tyson, where his work is pretty far juxtaposed from his accusations. Even your, I don't know, Al Franken or whatever. Louis C.K.'s comedy is very dark. That's part of what makes him so amazing as a comedian, is that he will make jokes about, he has a really good joke about being a child molester. I hate like saying it out loud. Part of me wants to laugh, and that's just the awful part that recognizes the humor. But part of me is like, oh my God, I don't even know how to work with laughing at that joke. Because I don't know where that joke came from.
Louis C.K., to our knowledge, is not a child molester.
Right, to our knowledge.
But he is a person who exposes himself to women without consent. So he was accused of masturbating in front of, two women who were mentees. Look, I don't know what's going on in my body, but we're going to just roll. So there were two women who were mentees of his, like unofficially, right? So they were younger comedians. It was a big deal for them to be able to go out on a tour of his and kind of learn and see, how the business really is. And so after a show, I believe, he invites them to his hotel room. They're thinking we're hanging out with our mentor, a seasoned comic, good stuff. And when they arrive, he asks if he can masturbate in front of them, to which they decline, and he still proceeds to do it. Totally unacceptable.
There's
totally
no gray
unacceptable.
area there at all.
None. But I did have someone argue with me.
So Paul,
that
this show is problematic. Okay, what's the argument?
that it wasn't as problematic, that my response to it and the women's lack of consent, this was a different. I'm trying to do the person's nonsensical argument justice. And so basically it was like they weren't touched. They weren't touched. And so because they weren't touched, this person thought it was less severe of an assault and something that maybe
shouldn't require the response.
Shouldn't require the response and the backlash. And my thing was, I don't judge, like, whatever your proclivities are, right? Sexual proclivities are. Like, if you like masturbating in front of people, like, with consent, that is, like, not a thing and pretty darn vanilla to me.
Do your thing.
But without consent, it's a really big issue.
You're kind of a pervert.
Yes, you are a pervert. And it would have been easy to get consent, or in this case, he asked for consent. So that's and they declined. So he had the presence of mind to know that he needed to ask to do what he did, but he didn't care about the answer, which goes into the fact that most of these sexual assault things are power issues. It may have been a compulsion of his. A lot of predators have like a sickness. I just think that conversation, out of respect to people who have been victimized, should be had separately, because then I feel like you're lessening the harm done.
I do want to get into that to an extent because I'm serious about the issue in terms and I think some people get the wrong idea about me, and I'm sure some people are going to listen to this show and get the wrong idea about us, because we're not just sitting with outrage and just dragging the people, recklessly for yucks and lulls, etc. And I get where the role that has in the popular culture. But for me, as a person who works in this space of dealing with victims and dealing with people with problems and researching this stuff, it's not good enough to me to just drag a person. I need understanding. I need to share that understanding with people. And yeah, you kind of have to talk about the difference between, say, a Louis C.K. and even a Cosby, who has a compulsion.
There's a time and a place for everything. So I can assume, because Louis C.K. asked, didn't get consent, and continued on, that he may have some kind of compulsion, that this may be compulsory behavior, right? But I ain't got time for that today, because the bottom line is he violated these women by forcing them to watch him pleasure himself after they declined and let him know they didn't want to take part in that experience. So now, if Louis C.K. talks to somebody and is diagnosed with something, some kind of issue, then, I think that a lot of people have issues, and there's nothing wrong with discussing those things. But in this moment, we don't know that he has any issue.
Right.
All we know is he made the horrible decision to ignore somebody's ability to consent or decline participation in an action. And so, we got to deal with what we know. It's the same thing, like I said, with the other person. What we don't know, I don't want to make up, because it's too big of a deal to fill holes all willy-nilly and just go with a false narrative about someone. However, what we do know, we can address. And what we don't know in this situation is if he has any real issue. And so until we know that, all we can address is the fact that he is a predator.
Yeah. And he's taking some L's. One thing to learn. So it's on a slightly lighter note. I wonder how this is going to affect Hollywood as a whole, because we are now seeing a pattern to an extent. Not all of them, because guys like Weinstein have been getting away with it and dealing with this issue forever. But this happens more often when somebody's got a new project coming out. And so
I think that's kind of reckless. I don't think that's diminishing the harm. This happens because they're doing something major.
I'm not saying that this happens because they're doing something major. I'm saying these. So let me backtrack and give you the full scope. This story about Louis C.K. has been circulating for years. I knew about it years ago.
Well, a lot of these stories have been circulating for years.
And so now, A, because of the media buzz, and B, also because Louis C.K. had a movie coming out that was supposed to be this big deal movie, where he was trying to go from being a stand-up comedian to auteur filmmaker. He filmed a movie in secret, in black and white, with A-list stars in it. That won Sundance Award or whatever the fuck. And so I guess the point I'm trying to get to is it'll be interesting to see how Hollywood responds, in that now they have to start thinking about the bullshit they've been doing. Did you read the letter from I don't remember her name. She was in Inception. Juno. She was the girl in Juno.
No. I can't think of her name now either, but I know Paige. Something Page. It will come to me. But I think it's something Page.
But so she talked about how at 16 she had crazy shit happening to her. And so you see that Hollywood has this deep culture, and there's way more skeletons out there than.
So I think there are a lot of skeletons out there for a lot of people, if we're real. A lot of the discussions, some of the podcasts I listen to, we're talking about rape culture in general, and how rape culture was mainstream culture years ago. If you think about some of the things we watched on TV, your Real Worlds and your TRLs, and not so much TRLs, but there was a Spring Break, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. And occasionally on these shows, on live TV, someone would get groped, inappropriately touched. It may have been for joke purposes. Obviously, it was not funny. And yeah, so
if you watch any 80s teen movie, there's probably at least one sexual assault played for laughs.
Yeah. The lack of consent was a joke. It was a joke. It was funny to do something to someone of a sexual nature without them either being aware or definitely without them consenting. So fast forward, I think on some things, right? So we have as a society a long way to go on a lot of things. But I think on some things, there have been folks who have successfully done the groundwork to raise the consciousness of the masses on different issues. So right now, the consciousness has been raised, and we're understanding that a lot of the things we thought were jokes and we thought were cool in the 80s and the 90s and the 70s are not cool. Yeah. And those things were assaults.
Yeah, but there's a reckoning that has yet to fully come for a lot of.
When you say there's a reckoning, what do you mean?
Meaning that it's not over. Every other day, there's new people.
So I think I've heard a couple of people, and I won't call out any names, but it's funny to me how some of the personalities I listen to, some people I even follow, are getting in front of things, are saying, like, this is wrong. And, maybe back then we didn't realize it was wrong, but it was wrong.
Right.
And I think that's maybe what has to happen now, right? The conversation needs to continue, but maybe it would be healthier, I don't know, to continue it by allowing people to get in front of the missteps they made in the past. Now, if some things were never in question, right? Some things were never in question. But I heard somebody talk about Freaknik and the Black Picnic.
Black Bike Weekend. Just different things. I did not get to participate in any of that, but I've seen some videos that brought me to tears, literally, of women experiencing the worst harassment and assault in the streets of Atlanta. But those videos are shared and were posted at a time because those things were the norm. They were in certain circumstances, in certain social circles. It was acceptable. I really think the chuckle is for the fact that I cannot breathe. So you got,
but not for the tapping.
You had sneeze, sniffles, burps, yawn, and what was that?
I have no idea. That was a combo. That was something different, right? Yeah. But I'm still alive, so we're going to keep pushing. But my thing is, I think a lot of women, so I think this is what's fueling these conversations and these outings. A lot of women didn't process their experiences as assault. So we were talking the other day, and I'd heard a personality talk about her childhood, and she was saying how when she was 16, she went out of her way to look and appear older. She's curvaceous. And so she seemingly convinced a guy that she was older. He disclosed his real age, which was 26. So he was a 26-year-old dating a 16-year-old. However, he did not know. She hadn't explicitly said she was 16. Right. So what we believe, or what the person telling the story believed, was that she had pulled the wool over this guy. But in retrospect, she was like, okay, well, was he a predator? So if the guy really didn't know, right? And that's a conversation. There are so many things that a 16-year-old is not going to know about life. Their living situation is going to be a red flag because most 16-year-olds do not live on their own. Most 16-year-olds go to school during the day. So in my opinion, I am almost positive that something probably made him question her, and he just chose to push on.
If they dated for any period of time, if this was just not a one night stand or a couple hookup situation, if they actually talked on the phone and went out for dinner, then he's either a predator or an idiot. But if this was just a physical thing without much thoughts or words exchanged, it's an unfortunate thing that happened. But I think it's low-key irresponsible to call him a predator if you put in front of a man a physical being that does not look 16 by 16 standards. And then you say to that person, this person is 20. I don't know what you expect the guy to do.
So I was conflicted. I want to finish my initial thought, and then I'll come back to that, because I'm conflicted because I feel like there should have his spidey senses should have alerted him that something was wrong. I'm sure, because I believe they did date, that there were conversations where she said, oh, let me hang up my book bag or something like that. And when a chick tells you she has to hang up her book bag or tell her parents she's made it home safely or says stuff like, my mom's tripping, I think you should ask at that point, how old are you? So, So I'm conflicted because I mean we don't know if the guy actually knew.
If she said she was 20, then she's gonna say 20. Well,
she did say she was of age. I don't remember exactly what age she gave him, but she did give him that she was of age. The thing is, that conversation or hearing that story made me think of men I knew when I was a young girl, who quite honestly I was flattered at different times to get their attention, but now looking back, they were clearly predators. Mm-hmm. It was clearly inappropriate actions. And so I think a lot of women in Hollywood or outside of Hollywood, because we too were raised in the bubble of rape culture that you men, our male counterparts, were raised in. And so it's like, you know what? Like, I was uncomfortable with that. But not only was I uncomfortable, I should have said something because that was actually wrong. So I think a lot of the victims we're hearing about didn't probably immediately recognize or identify as victims of assault. Yeah,
assault or targets for assault or exploitation. I think that's definitely true. It's the scary thing. And just the last point I think I want to throw out is that the rape culture thing kind of goes both ways. In that rape culture teaches men to see women as objects and opportunities to manifest their manhood as opposed to, people. Uh-huh. And it also teaches women to see themselves as object and to see themselves, see value in themselves as their ability to self-objectify, attract men's attention, etc. And, we have to attack it from both ends. We don't have daughters.
But this is still an issue for sons.
Right. That's kind of what I was about to get to, is that if we had a daughter, we would have a sex-positive household where our daughter learns to understand herself as a sexual creature, a sexual being, but that as a part of who she is and not as a part of what she can offer to another person. And at the same time, we are constantly, to the point where it gets surreal sometimes, fighting against the casual misogyny of our son, who, I remember one day he came home and did he just jump up and say girls don't play basketball? I think
he said a lot of girls don't do this, girls don't do this, mommy, you can't do that. Which is, something we're constantly talking about. We're constantly exploring that with him. Why do you feel this way? I think sex positivity in a household is necessary regardless of what gender the children are that you're raising. So we're still going to have a sex positive household, which in my mind for us means we're going to talk about consent, talk about making healthy decisions, talk about making sure that your decisions are your decisions and you're not being influenced in a negative way by your peers. Our son right now, there's a little girl, adorable little girl, and his friends often scream out, "Oh, she's your girlfriend, she's your wife, she's your girlfriend, you guys are going to get married." And much of this is age appropriate, right? They're 4. However, when we go to unpack that with him, when he tells us, "Oh, so-and-so said that I'm going to marry blank," I say, well, how do you feel about that? Right? I don't want to immediately just say, oh, that's bad, that's wrong, no time for that, we don't want to hear that, that person shouldn't have said that, even if it hurt his feelings, because I want him to explore his feelings about what they're saying and arrive at a place where he's unfazed, where he understands that they are not trying to hurt him, where he's empowered to express to them that he's bothered by it and hopefully get them to stop the behavior. But I want him to be conscious and present and really take time to explore how things make him feel, how things may make other people feel, and act on his personal convictions and be respectful of people, and not just be
going with the crowd
and shook, basically, just going with the crowd.
Because some of it makes him uncomfortable.
To what the masses do.
Some of it makes him uncomfortable, and that's one thing. He's uncomfortable sometimes by people trying to make him kiss the girl, and
which is so inappropriate.
I think they're both equally attached to each other, but I think the girl probably has a more classic approach to her boy best friend.
So in all fairness, this little girl has an older sister who's probably in the zone of boyfriend, like, dislike, all that kind of stuff. And so children learn from their older siblings. And, I don't think it's that serious. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our relationship, our son's relationship.
It's not so much the relationship issue.
But
I wanted to talk about how we have to make him comfortable in that space, because inevitably he's going to, because what this comes down to, and this is an issue that's really big for me, and I stumble over it sometimes, but I always try to bring things back to it because I don't think enough people are talking about it, which is how black men manifest masculinity. Everything we're talking about tonight that has pertained to black men and black women has a big chunk of that is the way black men manifest masculinity is essentially broken and toxic.
So let me take you back, or pause you for a second, because most of the men we started talking, other than Neil deGrasse Tyson, I don't think we listed anyone who was
no, but I'm saying, like, within the context of this conversation, if we're talking about Freaknik, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, okay.
If we're talking about where it hits close to home for us, then we're talking about black men.
So, maybe on another show we can explore, like, why aren't there any
story.
African? So obviously
you mean
that
like
Bill
this
Cosby,
story?
right?
Well,
but
I think that's an odd manifestation of institutional racism, that you don't have as many black men in in places of power or where it happens all the time. It's just not as newsworthy. It's also a matter of how newsworthy it is to point out black women have been abused. I doubt if Bill Cosby didn't have white victims, that it wouldn't have had the same level of intrigue.
Sad, but definitely true. But you're right. So, your concerns about toxic masculinity.
Well, yes. So essentially, our son and all young black men, if you have a young black man in your life, whether it's your child or nephew or mentee, you start, this thing called gatekeepers. You are a gatekeeper to that young black man's identity of what it means to be a man. And you can either, point them into a direction that is going to be constructive and positive for everybody that's around him, or you're going to replicate the issues that a lot of black men have now. And you do that through not telling them that they're not a man because they did not reproduce the toxic behavior. One thing I fear with our son is which little boy or girl has the household where he's going to be called gay or a pussy for not wanting to push up on this little girl. And it can happen if it hasn't already. You know what I'm saying? I think we both are thinking about the same little boy immediately.
I think we know some kids who are being encouraged to display behaviors that are far too aggressive.
Yeah. And that's where it starts. It starts with that moment where you get, you don't understand it then, where you get emasculated because you didn't want to take this action that you weren't comfortable with as a human, but you were told that because you weren't comfortable with it, you are now less of a man. And so, that's what translates into the Freaknik stuff.
About your meme. Your meme.
I didn't. We went almost an hour already. I was going to let us slide on it.
So I think a lot of the earlier parts of the show you guys won't hear. Aren't you wondering what happened? So I think we can actually spare some time. So,
okay.
So there was a meme that maybe went a little viral. So not.
I don't know. I don't think so. But the topic seemed.
I saw it a lot, or a couple of times in a few of the groups I am a part of. But basically, there was a picture of an attractive guy, attractive black guy, and the gist was he has money and he's gainfully employed and he treats you well and he's spiritual, I think they put in there, and all these great things, right? A lot of things that would be on most women's checklist for a mate. The only thing is he is bisexual, or at one point identified as bisexual. And so it was asking women, would you still consider him for partnership?
It's important to note that for the purposes of my opinion on this, that not only so he I don't know if he still identified as bisexual, but he admitted to having had sex with a man before. Despite this, he had every intention to be with you, hypothetically, and wanted to marry you and have a life with you. But would you deal with it? And I feel like, depending on the circle, but I feel like the overwhelming majority of women were like, no, I couldn't do it. And and so when I first came across this meme, the first time I came across it, I was in a group that I tend to err on the side of being antagonistic because if I'm honest, I have a low opinion of a lot of the people in the group. So I came right out and said that's pretty much just being homophobic, because aside from the guy being, having had a homosexual relationship at some point in time, there's really no reason to reject him that is not tied to that.
So this is kind of connects to the conversation I said we would have with our son and what sex positivity in our household looks like. Asking him, encouraging him to unpack things so that he realizes or he has to take stock in what's informing his decision. So you don't like something. Right now, it's like you don't like them saying you're his girlfriend, or I'm sorry, she's your girlfriend. Then why? Why don't you like it? You have the right to like it. Let's unpack so you understand why you don't, so then you can speak intelligently about that. And it's the same thing for preferences that people may have. You lost me when you told people they were homophobic. Mm-hmm. I think being homophobic is a problem. Far too many people are homophobic, and I'm not a fan. And I think, I put that term in, like, I rank it very close to being called a racist, and like
a misogynist.
Like, I think you have to be very careful how you use those words, because if you use them inappropriately or recklessly, then you really do
you have to
harm to
the further
conversation. Yes,
you definitely
about
don't pull
what
that
it means
word
and
out.
the impact of these isms.
You definitely don't
phobias.
Pull that word out if your goal is to have a full-on conversation about the issue.
Yeah, I think
which is true. I get that.
Yeah,
doesn't make my opinion change, but I get where you're coming from.
Well, I had an issue because most of the women, it was an issue of preference, and I think also an issue of education. So if you encourage people to unpack it, which I think for some of the folks you did and other people did, and some of them unpacked it in a way where you were like, okay, if that's how you feel, that's actually a legitimate reason, so be it. You're not homophobic because of it. There were other folks who really didn't know why. It was just like, I don't know, he may like other men. He may cheat on me with a guy.
You have to admit, that was like, for all the people that said nay, that was like 85% of them.
So it was I don't know if it's 85%. It was far too many, but I think you take moments like that to educate people. People who identify as bisexual really have a hard way to go, because people always reason is like, oh, they want their cake and eat it too. Oh, they can't decide. Oh, they're just confused. And they get that, just as much. I'm not going to say more, but just as much, maybe in some circles more, than people who identify as gay. Mm-hmm. People just don't want to legitimize or take seriously the idea that you can be bisexual. And if you are bisexual, it doesn't mean that you're undisciplined, that you're just like a animal when it comes to things of a sexual nature.
Right.
That you just like, if you're gay, it doesn't mean you're a predator. And I think we need to encourage people, like the conversation about the meme could have been healthier if you wouldn't have started off with they're homophobic. And you would have sought to inform and educate people.
Well, see,
because I think if they were educated, they would have said, okay,
my response
on
to
second thought, maybe this could be a good guy.
My response to that is that, so there's first the context of the particular first version of this conversation, and then there's the greater context of how people act in this conversation. So let's acknowledge first that we're talking about majority black women, and there is, and I failed at this at point in time, there's a need to recognize that the internet culture and black men can be very antagonistic to black women on the internet. There's some dudes that just love fucking with black women on the internet. I don't know what they went through to put them to that place, but we talked about these motherfuckers a couple times.
Yes.
And so I didn't want to get into that space because I'm not wanting to antagonize black women, and calling out these women who happen to be black are really close together. And I kind of dropped that bomb and bounced because of that, because there was not really a space to have a full conversation. I came off maybe stronger than I needed to, but these are also, many of these women will call themselves feminists and will call themselves LGBTQ allies.
You know, I mean, and some of them may consider themselves allies, but just because you identify as an ally doesn't mean you necessarily done the work to really educate yourself. I mean, I know a lot of white folks who think they're allies, people of color, and they think it because they don't use the N-word.
They're casually racist. They have microaggressions.
So, but you then you educate them, because if they really want to be an ally, then let me give you the book and let me educate you and encourage you to take some steps and act on that. If you're sincere, and it's the same thing for these women. Okay, so you think you're an ally to a community, then let's unpack why you wouldn't be accepting of this individual who identifies in a way, in a different way, and let's build from there. I think you just don't you don't tell people they're homophobic from jump.
And that was the other thing I wanted to point out.
I think it requires exploration.
It's also important to point out the point that you have all these black women advice figures on the internet and in media, and that you shouldn't, especially as a married man, you should be careful about how you tell black women about their love lives, because there's so many other people in their ear telling them everything they're doing wrong.
Well, that's true. That is definitely true.
But you mentioned preferences, and one of my classmates made the comment that preferences are not created in a vacuum, and you can't deny that if the rejection of this hypothetical person is based off of the semblance, the indication of waverance in their sexual presentation, that is at a minimum a microaggression. That is the same way as when a person comes up and says, "Wow, you speak so well." You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, how did you expect, or what do you expect this person to do?
I can't ignore that there's some validity to that. I just think you have to talk to people to really understand where they're coming from. I think a lot of the women may have changed their perspectives, or just, set with their preference a little bit.
They'd at least acknowledge
that there's some problematic things that inform that preference, if they would have been given the opportunity.
The most I got out of within this discussion is, I see that it is problematic, but I'm sorry. That was, which I guess is the best you can get sometimes.
Those people, and I mean, you can build from honesty. We may not build a friendship,
right?
But we get. I can appreciate your honesty, and at least I know where you stand on things, and I can move about my life accordingly.
To close out, I want to say, but this is where to connect the previous two threads of conversation. When I talk about the compulsory pressure of black masculinity, this is an example of it, because I would venture to say, and I hate that I'm doing this, but it is what it is, that this is not as common with, let me take that back. I won't do it. This is not as common with more progressive women and more progressive people who sometimes
say these women are not.
I think it would. No, I think it is. That is a clear sign of it. It's a clear sign of progressiveness if you can't feel like a person can have a certain place in your life based on their sexual past. You know, that's like, and we have a friend that commented and said he didn't want to marry a woman that had had sex with more than 10 men before they met. And that is regressive as hell. You know what I'm saying?
That's problematic.
And to get back to my point, because I got off track. The point I'm trying to make is when we have these types of limitations on how black men are able to express themselves and see the world and present themselves in the world, we get the flip side of this. We get the dudes that feel like I had this conversation in so many words at work, and somehow we ended up talking about little boys and young men in college that participate in trains, as in running a train.
Trains are rape.
Trains are rape. Well, trains are definitely a big part of rape culture.
Trains are rape.
Trains being rape, I don't think is fair to the rare women, and they do exist, that enjoy participating in group sex.
So group sex, threesomes, not rape. Trains, rape.
This is good. I'm just gonna put it out there. As a man who was offered to participate in one train, in which I believe it was probably going to end up it was a rape.
How do you? So, can I ask?
We can talk about it. Let's go there.
How did the woman ask you if you like to participate? Because it always seems like these conversations are had amongst the male participants.
Right. So the first time, I essentially witnessed the train. I was brought to an apartment by a trusted male friend. To essentially chill and play video games. And when I got there, there were two other men there. I'm sorry, it was me and two other guys in the car. I got there was another guy, and we sat down and started playing video games. A guy came out of the room and was essentially adjusting himself and putting himself back together after having sex with a girl. And there was a conversation of sorts where basically it was let known that the girl was open for some other guys to come in.
I don't think.
Let me finish.
So no one can give consent for you. This is not a parent signing a permission slip.
I completely agree. And so in witnessing this, especially for the first time, I was like, no, not for me. Thank you. I'm gonna just play Madden and chill. And I think I was probably 19, maybe going on 20.
So your story is not unique. I've actually heard stories similar from other people. I'm sorry, and somebody let me know. You know, if I'm off here, I welcome the criticism. But I feel like consenting adults have threesomes or group sex where everybody agrees that we're going to all be in this thing together, and how it plays out and who's involved when and whether we're all doing things at the same time or we're taking turns is your prerogative. But that's what a consenting adult does. I feel like the way a train has been explained to me, because I've never witnessed one, I haven't participated in one, the way it's been explained to me, it always seems like the woman, her consent is her ability to give consent is somehow compromised, or she empowers someone else to consent for her. I've heard things where she's just not knowledgeable, where it's like, we switched people out and having sex with her, and because of the darkness of the room or whatever.
There's a lot of awful stuff, but I'm just
always rape.
But that's just not. So that's just not true. There's most trains are probably rape. I will say that to you.
So what's the difference between a train and a threesome?
If a girl consents to having sex with multiple boys.
So why do we call it a train, and why would we just call it
group sex? Because trains are not about sex, and this is the point I was trying to get to. Trains are not about sex. Trains are about masculinity. And men named the act. And as with every other sex act named by men, like beating up the pussy and getting some ass and cutting and banging and all these things, they are violent and dehumanizing in their terminology. And that is what happens. Boys, young men, I wasn't invited to that train because people were like, man, sex is great. We should all do it. It was, hey, this is an opportunity for all of us to prove our manhood.
Well, this is an opportunity to take advantage of someone.
Right. And so that in and of itself is what I'm talking about when I talk about this toxic masculinity. Because most of these boys that participate in trains are not participating in them for the act of sex. They're participating in them because they feel pressured to act.
I agree, which is why you need to educate your sons, but intent doesn't change impact. It's something like I always say in my daily life. And so just because my intent was to show I'm big and I'm bad and I'm a man and men do this, it doesn't change the fact that you took advantage of someone, you assaulted someone.
Oh yeah, I'm not trying to excuse the men
you
that
raped
participate
someone.
in this.
And so like I just think I don't know that kids, I don't know who would know if kids are doing these kinds of things.
I know. I work in this space.
But well, yeah, you do. But I anytime I hear someone talk about a train, which is usually on various forms of media, and I'm just talking aloud in my car. Nobody's hearing me.
Probably
but I always
about gang
scream
rape.
Because I'm like, this is assault. Like let's call this assault. I think we can call intercourse with multiple people different things, and I'm okay with those other names we can call it. I just don't like calling it a train because I've never heard a situation where that term was used and it seemed like everyone was consenting, was aware, and it's just a bad thing.
But there's so many intersecting issues of presentation in that, because so how many girls, women, adult or young adult, are going to come out and say that was something they wanted to do or that they were interested in? There's way too much social stigma involved with that.
That is true. A lot of women don't talk freely about their interest and their sexual history or their past because you're right, we're stigmatized. And I think that's horrible too, because if you're consenting and the person you're involved with is also consenting, you should be able to do whatever you want to do. Now, you don't have to tell me about it, but if you're moved to talk about it or moved to say this is something I've experienced, I am not with people shaming you for your experiences. So I do think that's something that women deal with all the time. You know, going back to the friend who was like, I didn't want a woman who slept with more than 10 partners. It's like, is 10 your lucky number or something? I don't know how you unpack that to make that make sense.
There's a lot of
that
men that would very quickly date a girl who messes with girls, but would never date a girl who admitted she had a train run on her. And that's the absurd, ugly nature of gender today in black communities and beyond.
I think that's just in all communities. So don't give us that.
I said black communities and beyond.
Okay.
But to lighten it up for a second, we're going to talk about the shady couple just watched, and then we're going to do our great moment in history, and then we're going to keep it moving. So, baby, what did we finish watching at the behest of your brother and my brother-in-law, your brother, last night?
Switch.
Nope, that's not the name of the movie. You're tired and sick.
Switch?
Split.
I think Switch has something to do with sex. We were just talking about group sex and trains or something.
Yeah, let's not go.
I don't know.
No, hopefully nobody caught that, and we're going to move on without going too much further into what a Switch is.
Just saying, my words in serious ways.
So, Split, which is the most recent movie by M. Night Shyamalan. Shyamalan?
I think Shyamalan.
Shyamalan?
I like his name.
His name's kind of cool. That's not his real name. But the most recent movie by M. Night Shyamalan. And the first not hysterically awful movie he's made since Signs. It was all right.
The movie has great actors in it. So who's the lead guy?
It has a great actor.
A great actor. What's his name? I don't remember his name.
No. James McAvoy.
Yes. Okay. So
he played Professor X in the X-Men and probably a bunch of other stuff.
And he acted his butt off. I think the issue here is that the movie shits itself at the end. It's like all these
Whoa, spoilers. Nigga.
really. I'm not gonna tell how it ends. This is just my
people,
opinion.
I was going in. If you go into the movie knowing that the twist is trash, then it ruins part of the movie. You want to be able to look at the twist and be like,
and
fucking shit.
Well, excuse me, nobody's watching this movie anyway. I think the movie shits itself at the end. Watch it still because you may disagree. But it's like basically he writes a movie and there's all these interesting ways you can go and things that can happen to the characters. And it's like he gets overwhelmed, he gets writer's block, and he just like, I quit.
Yeah.
And so he takes the most easy, convenient way out. So the movies his movies often start really, really slow. This one is not an exception.
It's 2 hours long.
It starts really, really slow. And as soon as it picks up, he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. So, watch the movie. I'm not going to give any more detail or any detail.
Like as I think about it, there's so many different ways he could have resolved the main conflict that would not have required that lame twist.
So I can't even respond because you're so sensitive to spoiling it for people. If we can't talk about what the twist is.
So in 5 seconds we're gonna talk about.
Well, no, I think we
5.
Okay.
4, 3, 2, 1. Spoiler alert now. So
it's a zoo. He's an animal.
That's the
I'm sorry, I just felt like I had to just come out with it. It was very
but that's not even the full twist though. That's like the twist that really pissed me off. I was okay with that actually. What pissed me off, so the story is split. It talks about split personalities, and so James McAvoy's character has 23 split personalities, and
is building a 24th.
Is building a 24th called the Beast, who is just superhuman, has superhuman powers. And at first they're talking about it and it's like, okay, this is just going to be something dumb. But like, oh no, it's straight up and down toward the end of the movie. It actually is true. This guy gets superpowers from his 24th personality. And you know what? It's weirdly enough, that didn't bother me. I felt like they earned that. And I was really like, okay, I fucks with this. He's climbing the wall with his bare hands for no reason. He's jumping from corner to corner in this little cavern or sewer, whatever. She shot him point blank with a shotgun, and he just kind of got up. I get it. I fucked with it. But the split personalities were built because this is a kid who had went through abuse. And as is part of this particular type of research and disorder, the other personalities are created in order to deal with the abuse. And so in this very moment, he's talking to the last girl left alive. And he's shouting about how the unsullied and the unbroken are truly the impure ones, and only those who have been.
I like how you try to do the voice.
only those who have been forged in the fires of pain can truly survive. And da da da. And so throughout the movie, they've been flashing back to the fact that this girl also had been abused, but they did it in a way that. It kind of, I don't know if they purposely made it not leave an impact. Like it made you understand her a little bit, but it didn't leave an impact in terms of like what she was dealing with and what she was doing. And here's the dumb twist. As he's coming in for the kill, he notices she takes her shirt off. She's had this shirt off for a second, and they haven't done a close-up of her body. So as he's coming in for the kill, he notices that she's a cutter. And I'm assuming she's a cutter as a process for dealing with her own trauma, unresolved trauma. And he's like, "Oh, you're one of us," and he leaves. That's it.
Literally, that's it. That's it. After 2 hours of watching a guy with multiple personalities hold 3 young girls captive in what looks to be some kind of dungeon, but ends up being like the janitor or like basement
support staff of a zoo.
So it's like the janitor's area. It just shit itself at the end. It starts off
so
good
stupid.
enough, and you're like, okay, where is this gonna go? And through flashbacks, you learn a little bit about the young lady who becomes the main character, and she has an interesting storyline. It's pretty easy to put those flashbacks together. So you're like, okay, well, so what's gonna happen? Is she gonna use that pain to propel her to lead these other young women to safety, which doesn't happen. So yeah, it could have went so many other ways, didn't go well.
Instead, it went down the toilet.
Yeah. So I think, I'm feeling like we had a pretty decent show.
You are not going to skip today's Shady Moment in History.
And I don't think we need to do it.
Nope. That's definitely happening. So I'm just going to go ahead. Because today's Shady Moment in History is actually very timely. Today in 1973, President Richard Nixon voiced his support for the Alaskan oil pipeline. And do you know why?
Ooh.
Well, so that is significant today because today the Keystone Pipeline that had all these people, rightfully so, especially now, protesting and fighting, and it was all this stuff. And just, people said this is going to be bad for the environment, and if there's an oil spill, it's going to be disastrous. And lo and behold, today, the Keystone Pipeline had a 200,000 gallon oil spill throughout the pipeline.
Wow.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't know.
Yeah, you probably didn't catch that one. That just started.
So informative and so interesting.
You are so bad. You are so
totally
an
blew
awful
my
person.
mind. I'm gonna have to do some Googles. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, it's fucked up. It's fucked up, but it just shows the shadiness of the world we live in. Because history is doomed to repeat itself. With that said, babe, I think we had a strong, very problematic episode. But I think people will enjoy it. With that said, baby, I love you very much.
Love you too.
Peace.
Peace.